All right, everybody, it's 1:02. It's that magic time to start today's webinar. So as you all know, we're going to be discussing charge codes in today's webinar, kind of the building blocks to how you're going to track financial activity and what's going on at your property. So to get started, we're just going to kind of quickly run through setup in Rover for charge codes. Just a quick overview of the basic components of what you'll need to start setting up and managing charge codes in Rover. And then Sean Klein here, my lovely co-presenter, is going to walk you through those nitty-gritty details of fees, taxes, understanding inclusive versus exclusive tax, and just some different kind of calculation rules that we think are really going to help you kind of understand how to use this in Rover. Following this 30-minute webinar, we are going to open up the discussion to questions. There'll be a quick Q&A session. But of course, you can feel free to submit questions with the chat feature of Join Me. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hope you're ready to really get your knowledge on today's webinar, and I'll be passing this over to Sean now.
Thanks, Christine. This is Sean, and I know some of you have worked with me in the past, and some of you are new folks to it. So I wanted to talk about, because there's always questions, and a lot of times we go through charge codes way back when we first set the system up, and then we get lost in them and or don't really remember what's going on with them or how to set them up. So I wanted to talk through them, and we're really looking at charge codes, and I'm going to do almost everything excluding payments, because those are always just a little bit unique and are more often than not set one time and don't ever have changes. So I want to talk starting with charge groups, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between my presentation and the system just as a reference point for everybody. But charge groups are set up in the same location that we're going to do everything else for it, and that those charge groups are sitting right here as part of our financial setup. So it's charge groups, the payment methods, and charge codes are all intimately tied together. But the thing that comes about it for things, and why I start the conversation with charge groups, is charge groups have two real functionalities for you as at the hotel to reference on it. The first is going to be in our reporting. So when we do reporting and we do, whether it's looking in the journal, in the financial transactions and looking at the journal, or if it's looking at the comparison report and where things get rolled up, and all of those different things, they don't really relate to the end-all be-all financial reportings of what you at the hotels may be doing in your back office systems and things, but it's when I say what's reporting, it's our roll-up reports to say all of these are like charges or different things that way. As well, the second area that they go to is a grouping on a guest bill. And so that if I'm looking at a guest bill as an end user and as a front office staff or somebody that way, it's going to allow for some grouping of those charges within the bill. And so you'll see those items all tied together. So if you have a guest that's there for multiple nights, we'll have their room charges potentially in the room section, and you might have taxes broken out, as well as food and beverage items and miscellaneous items, but all of those beyond the reporting that you're going to do yourself and can pull those groupings that way in the journal, it's going to lump it together for people and the front office agents to look at it on the bill, which can potentially save money. I always think about it when I was a front office agent and you would look at the bill and you looked at it and you saw a number and you said, well, it's $1,000 bill or €1,000 bill. And you're like, well, what does that make it up? And the only way to really see that was to print out a guest folio and be able to say, well, here's a copy of all your charges. Instead, by using some of this grouping for a billing, it becomes much easier to say, well, Christine, I see that you've got your $1,000 bill, and I see that it's $700 and $775 in room, and there's about $100 in taxes, and that leaves us with another $125, I think, off the top of my head, to be used for food and beverage or other incidentals. So it allows you to give those lump sum things to there and get used and created. So those, as I mentioned, are all set in charge groups and are really quick and easy to set up. They do change. If we go in, I'm going to use my example hotel, and we've got things here that we've got room, we've got food and beverage, miscellaneous. Anything that we put in here, they're all there. And to add a new one, all we have to ever do is simply add in a new grouping, and it can be used right away, and you can move things within there and get things updated. So charge groups have a couple of different uses that way. The other thing that comes really into play is really within our actual charge groups and the charge codes are the charge types. And this is a secondary item that we get set up in there. And these are permanently fixed items that we've set and are hard-coded, are not changeable, but they do have a variety of different things that get used. And I know that in the hotels that I've helped set up, I generally will say that the first 4 are the ones that I use the most, and the last 2 are generally not used but have some different things and can be used. The charge group, so I'm going to walk through and explain each of these a little bit. The first one is listed as room. And room is really, I will say, one of the first 3 are the most important and have the biggest impact. Room is what's going to roll up when we're counting room revenue to display on the on our title on our availability screen where we're talking about the room revenue for the day. It's going to roll up and do all the fun things in the market segment statistics. So if you're looking at statistics by market, it's all of those things that are going to impact and go to room. I know here in the States, when those properties that look to the 12th edition of hotel accounting, the room statistics are the ones that are going to roll up into room. So you might have room as part of that, but you might have no-show and things that are not there. But they could still be part of the same charge group of rooms. They are mutually exclusive, so they do not go together at the same time. The second type is going to be taxes, and taxes are a setting that we utilize that we then play with into our actual setup to say these are taxes that we are going to apply to a charge code. And we'll talk more about exclusive or inclusive in a few moments. But there is an ability for us to set what the basis is on them. Are they a percentage or a dollar amount? Is it a flat amount, and does it go to a couple different things for posting methodology? Payments are going to tie to our transaction codes that are going to tie to our payments. So that be that our credit card payment types or cash and different things. And those are the transaction codes that will only get used when you click on the pay button in a bill and charges or an account or anything that way. Others and add-ons are really the same with different items, naming conventions. They work the exact same way. It's really up to each and every hotel what you want to do it. Others was originally started to be things that were saying these are all charges that are not room taxes payments or associated with a particular add-on, but add-ons and others are exactly the exact same item. And the last charge type is fees. And fees were originally developed for some properties that charge a fee directly for payments, particularly if you were charging a fee to pay with a credit card or something else for some places that do that. So a fee can be added onto a charge code. It will calculate based on every time that charge code gets used. But some things to take note of it is that taxes are not considered part of that, and they won't auto-generate when they post as a fee to attach to a transaction code or a charge code. It's not going to auto-generate any taxes on its own. So kind of looking for that, I'm hoping that there's not any questions. I haven't seen anything pop up into the chat logs yet, so I'm hoping that makes some sense. But I want to then kind of move into our actual setup of charge codes and talk about exclusive and inclusive taxes and go from there. So kind of looking at our charge code setup, I'm going to walk through in a minute and actually create a new charge code. We have a couple different pieces that go into our charge code. The first one is that actual charge code and the first item that is a mandatory item. This is an alphanumeric character. It can be whatever you want. There's not really a restriction on it. You can put it, it could be a 2-digit character, it could be 1 digit, it could be a name of something depending on where it is. I've seen all of the different items utilized. The second is going to be our description, and this is what's going to show on the guest bill. So I'm always a proponent of making sure that this is a guest-friendly item, so that if a person gets this sees this on their bill after the fact and they're not checking out and it's 2 weeks later or something else, that they can understand what it is. And it doesn't go for different things. So there's lots of different ways to code things and track things on our own. If you want to do that, I'm always a suggester of using small extra codes. So maybe you've got a couple different room charges that you use for different reasons. You know, it might say room charge -S or room charge -P for something that you want to track and recognize for, and I'm thinking of a particular hotel that might do things that way. but make it so that it's still generally understandable and usable by the guest. And I always think the other one that I go is that if you had to put this as part of an expense account and you were getting this as a financial controller or accounting person and looking at Sean's expense report and you looked at the bill, would you understand what it is? So that kind of is where the description goes to. Charge group is just what we first talked about, and those are those subjects where that we can do something for our own reporting and grouping and going from there. And the charge code type then are the items that are pardon me as I get tongue-tied here. Those are the items that are the room, the payments, the fees, the taxes, and go from there. And depending on what we set up, we'll can create additional drop-downs from there. And the last portion that we see on the left-hand side when we were actually creating a charge code is the fees. So if we were attaching a particular fee to an item is where we're going to select those fees. And on the far right-hand on the side, I show a little bit about taxes. And we have tax 1, and we can add multiple taxes. And I'm going to show you that in the setup, and that comes to our calculation rules. So coming and talking about taxes is we have the ability to do taxes as being inclusive or exclusive. The difference between exclusive and inclusive is how does it actually post. Here in the States, I can speak fairly well about that because almost all of the taxes are generally going to be exclusive. Thus, if we say that we have a $100 room charge and we have a tax of 10%, we're going to post the $100 room charge, and then we're going to post a $10 tax on top of that. So that's going to be our exclusive tax. An inclusive tax gets used much more often I've seen in Europe, as well I've seen it in some different cases in the States that gets used. But the idea of a tax inclusive item is that when we post a transaction, and one place that I know uses it inclusively in the States is for parking charges, that when we post a charge for that transaction code and it has taxes on it, those taxes are included in the amount. And in the back end and in the journalization, we see those items allocated out and done accordingly, but the guest doesn't see it. So I think if there's my math is going to be wrong off the top of my head, but if we said that there was a tax, if we had a parking charge of $45 for something, because I'll use that for San Francisco knowing that, and they had 12% tax on it, in the back end, what we would actually see is a posting for parking of $40.18, and then the difference of $4.22 as going to the tax posting. So it's included in the actual calculation when it gets posted. And then the second piece that comes in, particularly when we're doing an exclusive tax, can be our calculation rule, and I'll show you that just now. If I go to charge codes, I'm going to make a new charge code and go from here and create it as some examples. So I'm going to start and I'm going to click Add New, and I've got my charge code. And as I said, I can make it whatever I want. So I'm just going to make it 5 9s, and it's going to be Sean's test with taxes. And I'm going to put a charge group with it, and I'm going to say that it is what do I want to say it is? It's a miscellaneous, and the charge code type is going to be other because it's not a tax, it's not a payment. Add-on, as I said, it could be add-on or others could be there. It's not going to go to my rooms revenue, and it's not going to be a fee. So I'm going to classify as an other. I don't have any fees that I want to use and associate it with it, but I do want to add some taxes. So I'm going to use one on the far right side. I'm going to add my tax, and I'm going to choose my first tax that is going to be my CMP food tax, and I'm going to say OK, which is going to set my first one. And if I add a second tax, I'm going to go through and it's going to give me the second option, and I can say that it's a state sales tax. And when I do this second tax, it gives me a calculation rule option that can go and has a big impact on things. In this calculation rule, I can set something that is either going to be charge code base amount, or I could say it's charge code plus tax 1. So I'm going to use the example of charge code tax plus 1. When I add this, when this charge posts, if I charge a $100 posting to this item, it's going to calculate my tax 1 and say, okay, I've got 7.25% tax on that, and it's going to do that. So my $100 is going to post a $7.25 tax going that way. And then tax 2 is going to calculate as well, but it's going to calculate 6% on top of that the now $107.25. So instead of posting $6 as a tax if I had chosen charge code based 1 on that $100 amount, it's actually going to post, let me calculate that. It's going to post a tax of $6.44, rounding it up, knowing and going from that way. So this calculation rule can change and has impacts on it. And then the same thing happens if we add a third tax. I'm just going to make it an occupancies there. Same thing, I could do it as that it is either on the charge code base amount, or I could say it is on charge code tax 1, or on charge code plus tax 1 and 2. So each of these can become cumulative and go from there. And then, as always, the most important thing to do once we've done this is to save it. So I've saved that. And going from there, not seeing any other questions popping into everything so far, I'm going to do one other example and show you the creation of a tax, because there are a few things that are unique in when we set up a tax. So I'm going to create up a tax 9998, and we will call this Sean's example tax. And I can put my charge group. My charge group can be anything. It does not have to be a tax necessarily related. It may be there just for the reporting, as I said. And then when I put a tax and say that this is going to be a tax, it's going to, as I said, mention and bring a couple different things that it adds in our ability to do for here. I can set a minimum amount for it. I know there's a couple places in the world that have a preset minimum amount, so that a tax has to be always post at least, say, $1. But we don't have to utilize that. But we're going to say the amount of it of saying that we can say that this is, say, $10, or we can do a percentage. So we can do either or. And I know that if we set this as a percentage, that we can go out to at least 3 spots, but I believe we can also go out to 4 spots now for taxes and go there. The next portion that deals with taxes for setting them up is going to be how is this calculating on it? And it goes a couple different ways. These can go through and calculate it. So percentages are almost always going to be a flat or a room. Either one is going to go that way. So I'm going to use this as, say, that's a flat there. And there's going to be a couple things that go in here that actually, though, right now, the only things that we should be using for post type here, there's a small bug in my release version I'm looking at right this moment that's adding extra, is either stay or night. If we set a tax as a stay, it will post one time and one time only during a stay. If we want to repeat it each time, we're going to actually use night. And so we want to make sure that we choose night if the tax is going from there. I'll save this one, and I'm going to do one other one where we can use the adults and things that way. If I set up a tax that's going to be a per person tax, this might be used for an occupancy or a convention bureau type taxes where I've seen it used. If we say it's a tax, we could then say that you said, oops, don't want a fee. I'm going to say that this is a $2 tax, and it is applicable per person. So every time, for every person that is in the room, if we said that there's 2 adults and 1 child in there, this is going to calculate and say that the tax is going to calculate at $6 on each night of the stay. If it was 2 adults, we would say it would only be 4. Same thing could be changed, and we could say we're only counting the adults. So based on an actual reservation of the adults and children counts that are in there. So making those senses there. And then just as a kind of a couple different things, when we are actually on our charge codes, you can always start to see this, and you'll see a listing of 10, but I can say I want to see 25 charge codes, and it'll show me more if I want to. And then the other thing to see there is that you can search for things. So you can, I will use the idea of I can search it for aroma, and it's going to start to minimize the things that are going that way. Since that's what the code is, I can also start to search. It'll start searching after my 3 characters. It'll start to find my ones based on the charge code. As well, I can also put tax, and it's going to start to find things that have my tax and items that way. So the search bar, as always, is consistently user-friendly to be able to go that way. And then the last thing to point out is that when there are taxes associated with something, it will show you when you're on that display. So we can see that this initial one that was set up that we did earlier, the 9999, does show that we've got the state sales charge tax, the occupancy charge, and the CMP food tax of 7.25. So it'll show there. And if these were posting codes more so or different things that way, if I added the tax, it would show the posting code as well. So I can actually do that really briefly and just show it that way. And make sure I save this. And when I search for my 999, I'm going to now show, it's going to let it refresh. It now shows the code. So it shows the posting transaction and the codes that are actually associated with it. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I haven't seen anything directly pop in. Any fun questions I can answer for anybody on setting up charge codes? Tax exemption. I see that came in for the all chat. Currently, there is not any built-in functionality that we have set as tax exemption. I have done a couple different things for a particular hotel, for some hotels that have wanted to do it. I would say that as an example, if I did a room charge, and I'll just use this as an example, I might create I'll say a 1001 that is tax exempt room charge, and say that it's going to go to my room accounting this way. And unlike other room charges, I may not post it and it may not post the actual tax exemption. It wouldn't post the taxes there. So when that can be done, and that could then be applied to specific rate codes if you wanted to, or using things that way. I know that I will give my own personal background and found that using an automated tax exempt can be a challenge, because in the States we always have good fun craziness, and that you might have a state sales tax and a county sales tax or a city sales tax, but then have a business improvement assessment, or I know California has tourism assessments that those items are not exempt when people are exempt from taxes. So it always becomes an issue of just saying, the challenge for it to create it is to say, well, if it's tax exempt, what is it exempt from? Because you could have 4 taxes on a room charge, and only 2 of them are tax exempt. And everyone is unmuted, so you're free to speak up and ask those questions.
I understand your point about tax exemption, but in a dynamic rate, you don't necessarily have a client rate code or a dedicated rate code.
And I come from, and my background I apologize, I'm not sure who was speaking, but I will always pass and say my background has been from everything from being a front office, clerk, and being a night auditor, and being through all of those things. I know it way back in the dark ages when I was a front desk clerk and things, our accounting team always said, we'd rather post all of our tax transactions and then show a adjustment off of that, because it made it far easier for them on if they were audited by the assessor's office and things that way, to say, well, yes, see, I did charge Christine the taxes. However, she did provide me with the following documentation to then show that she was tax exempt, and based on this, we adjusted the taxes off. Any other questions I can answer for it on charge codes? See, you just put in a question there. If you want to edit a charge code, you can always make a change to it. You can simply go into the financials and go into the item and make any changes you need. So if you needed to change the description, you can change that and save it. As well, you could change the group it's in, and that will impact from going forward. It's not going to impact the previous reports, but it will, once saved, impact for going forward. So with that, I will then say thank you. We are recording this, but you can always reference it. You'll be able to find it online. As well, we refer you to stayintouch.freshdesk.com for the knowledge base and some of the answers that we have there. So you'll see this as well as our previous webinars, and we're looking to do one more in about 2 weeks on a new topic. So thank you much, and have a great afternoon.